Apparently, you're a little noisy. You know what? If you guys came in here very silently and just quietly sat down, I would be concerned, right? So, because this is about a conversation. All right. So, first of all, I say thank you very much for the bodies in the room. Also, I think there may be some bodies online. The camera's right there. And I would say hi to the bodies online if there is any. There's one there. But first of all, if you don't know who I am, Grace McGregor, your elected official for Christina Lake. We have been working on this official community plan for 5+ years. And some of that a result of COVID, some of it result of poor regional district whose planners kept finding a different job that wasn't quite as hard. I could put it that way. And so starting over several times, right? And now we've gotten to this point. And the reason that this meeting and this conversation is taking place now is so that the people that were south and have come back can be included in community consultation. So we try our best to be able to do that as we go along. This will probably be our last community consultation piece on this part of the official community plan. From there, we work on bylaws, which will be a lot of fun, and we'll be asking your input on that as well. I'm not the only one that thinks that's going to be fun. Okay, so I will start this off by saying thank you for being here. And I would introduce to you Elizabeth Moore, who is the Senior Planner for the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary. Elizabeth has been beside us the whole time. And I got to tell you, every time she came back to the table, she had some wording for us, some ideas for us. She listened to that group nonstop, and that's how we got where we are right now. It's a lot of work. Thank you, Elizabeth, and I turn this over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure working on the project. But so yeah, my name is Elizabeth Moore. I'm the Senior Planner with the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I will start off with acknowledging that in the spirit of respect, truth, and reconciliation, we honor and thank the Indigenous peoples on whose traditional and unceded lands we operate. We would also like to acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people of this region. And thank you all for being here. It's a beautiful day outside. I know it's hard to pull yourselves away from this beautiful place. And thank you to everyone who's online in whatever beautiful place you find yourselves. So the official community plan, as Grace mentioned, is the review is nearing its end. We have here tonight the first full draft of the OCP made available to the public. Copies are up here if you haven't grabbed one already. There are 11 maps around the room, mostly in that corner, but then the development permit area maps over there, which accompany the plan. And there are also copies of the draft OCP and maps online at the RDKB's engagement site for those people who are joining us online. It's Join the Conversation, and links were included in the advertisements that came out for this event. If you would like a link to this site, please reach out to me. I have business cards on that table, and we can put my email address in the chat box later on. So I'll also mention that all of the materials present right now are draft, and so revisions will be made to them as we move forward with the draft going on to the board of directors and whatnot. There's a number of steering committee members here as well, so I really want to thank them for their dedication on this project. Some of them have been with us for the entire 5 years. Some of them are here with name tags on, so feel free to approach them and ask them about the process. So this evening's focus, so last year we did 2 open houses where we looked at various different material in the plan, but tonight we are focusing on development permit areas, which have not been previously shared. Yeah, and so we have 3 presentations that are happening this evening that relate to the development permit areas. Our first one is Anita, Anita Ely, who's a specialist environmental health officer with Interior Health, and she is joining us remotely from Salmon Arm. And she'll be doing a presentation on septic systems, types of systems, what treatment in septic systems does. Then second presentation will be Christina Anderson, the RDKB's watershed planner. She's at the back there. And she'll be speaking about riparian areas, their importance and why we want to protect them. And then I will close out with a review of all of the development permit areas that are being proposed for the reviewed OCP. So each presenter will have about 20 minutes and then 10 minutes afterwards for questions. So if everyone can hold their questions until the end of the presentation, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you are in the room, if you're asking a question, could you raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic just so that people online can hear what you're asking. And if you're online, please just type your questions into the chat box and we will, we'll bring them up here as we see them. Yeah, so, and since Anita is joining us remotely, she'll be here for her presentation and the question period afterwards. So, and then she'll probably be signing off right after that. If you have another question about septic systems that pop up after she's gone, please feel free to send them to myself and I will share them with her and get an answer back to you. Yeah, so with that, I will turn it over to Anita. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll attempt to share my screen. Fingers crossed, technology works. Are you able to see the main slide?
Yes.
Oh, good. Perfect. Okay. But the problem is your screen and all of you are taking up the screen that has my notes and things on it. So I won't be able to see you. If someone needs to flag me down, maybe just speak up because I won't be able to see you. But thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So today, I'm just going to talk about considerations for water and sewage servicing in rural residential type development. As mentioned, I'm a specialist environmental health officer and I specialize in community development. We'll get to that in a second.
Sorry, Anita, we've lost your sound all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's right. It muted by itself all of a sudden. Okay, so Interior Health also, myself representing Interior Health, also like to recognize and acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories across Interior Health, which include the Silcotin, the Decal Dene, the Tunaha, the Inglakakma, the Shakwapan, the Statliam, the Silks, and in your part of BC, also the Sinayaks. And I'm located on Shakwapan territory, as mentioned before. I'm located in Salmon Arm, which is previously known as a Switsmalf, which refers to the food supply. There's a root crop in the bay here in Salmon Arm that this area was first named for. Really appreciate all of the beauty that we live in and work towards protecting. Okay, so moving forward, switch, there we go. So I would just like to I did introduce myself, but also my team. So I'm an environmental health officer. I work on the Healthy Community Development team, and we work collaboratively with municipalities, regional districts, such as the Kootenay Boundary Regional District, First Nations governments, and community partners to plan and create physical and social environments that support community members I specialize in how the built environment is planned, designed, and constructed. So everything from sewage systems and water systems to the way the streets are designed, to parks and all sorts of ways, our houses and where they're located in the community. All of that sort of falls under community planning. And then our team reaches out and connects to other interior health teams that can support the needs of communities. So for example, I've got on the screen there Marian Mason, and she's a specialist that focuses on reviewing and providing comments on subdivisions and administering the sewage system regulation. Also on the screen, I've circled Melissa Klein. She's our team's lead for the Kootenay, Central Kootenay and Kootenay boundary communities, and sort of our frontline person for people to connect with. Okay. So why am I here? So I understand that the community members, through your OCP process, have expressed a value for water and for drinking, for recreating, and also for its importance on the natural ecosystem. But with this love for water, there's also a desire to live and be close to lakes, rivers, streams, and the natural and rural settings. And I understand that some parts of Area C are starting to experience an increase in demand for developing on smaller parcels close to water. And unfortunately, wherever humans live, we have an environmental impact. And when we live in rural settings, a large part of our impact comes from the wastewater that we generate. So as such, the regional district is dedicated to protecting water quality, and you see that through your OCP or your draft OCP that you have. I'm here to, today to talk to you about things to think about when developing properties that are serviced by on-site drinking water and on-site sewage systems. And then of course, to answer any questions. And today, and if they come later, no problem. We can talk about it another time too. Anyone's welcome to give me a call. So today my presentation, excuse me. Today my presentation, oh, pardon me. Oh, pardon me, I've got a tickle in my throat. Okay, so today my presentation will include the health impacts of wastewater, a bit of a septic system crash course, what the sewage system regulation does and does not do, and then some examples of policies and practices that support health. And of course, time for questions. There we go. So the direct health impacts, primarily they're gastrointestinal diseases. So track pathogens. Pathogens is just the fancy word for bacteria and viruses that cause disease. So tracking disease-causing organisms into the home from malfunctioning sewage systems. So sewage comes onto the surface of the ground or into water, and then you walk through it, or the cat or the dog or kids walk through it, and then they track it into the house. And then it's transferred onto food or onto other surfaces. We also have pathogens that travel through the environment to reach surface water and groundwater. And that can contaminate drinking water, and it can contaminate recreational water. So when you're swimming in the lake, for example. There's also illnesses that are from consuming nitrates. So the first one are related to biological things, bacteria and viruses. The second one is related to the actual chemicals that are in the water. So high concentration of nitrates and phosphates, like in the drinking water, and nitrates in particular are considered a health hazard. And there are a few places across the interior health region where nitrates have contaminated the aquifer, the groundwater in that area. One place I can think of related to farming practices. Another area I can think of is actually the source would be on-site sewage systems. And this picture is a little bit crude, but it definitely portrays what's going on in the environment that's happening. So indirect health impacts. The first one that comes to mind is algae blooms. So algae blooms cause decreased drinking water treatment treatment systems don't work very as well when you have algae blooms. They gunk up filters, they cause UV lights to not work properly, that type of thing. The possible cyanobacteria toxins, some of those microorganisms, bacteria that are in the water, one of their waste products as they grow and eat and do their life cycle produces a toxin, a poison that causes illness in humans and other animals and fish. So that's another possibility. It's a special type of bacteria. The other thing is that you have poor recreational water quality, and that would decrease physical activity for people. And it would also impact tourism economy. And when people rely on the tourism for their livelihood, they would have less money for housing, for recreation, for medical needs, prescriptions, healthy foods, all of those sorts of things. So that's an indirect impact. Similarly, individual family level costs are there. So systems are or can be, they are, but they can be even more costly to install and maintain. And then they can have costly repairs, which then impacts the family's ability to achieve all of those other things that are needed for a healthy life. And then at the community level, there's also costs. So if many sewage systems in an area are not functioning the way they should, then the community is going to need to start thinking about infrastructure, whether that's community drinking water systems or community sewer systems or both. And those community level costs can also be quite significant. Okay, so before we can really talk about too many other things related to sewage, we need to have a bit of a crash course. So the first part is just the basic parts of an on-site sewage system, also known as a septic system, quite often by many people. There's three main parts. The first one is the septic tank, which is there closest to the house. And that's sometimes called a pre-treatment tank. The most traditional types of septic tanks are just a tank with gravity flow. It has no electricity, flows in one side and out the other. But nowadays, there's also some fancier versions. We're going to go into that in a few minutes. The second part of a septic system is called the distribution pipes. So this is where the effluent, the sewage water, leaves the tank and floats out and gets distributed underground over a larger area. And then the last part is called the absorption field. It can also be called a drain field or a dispersal field or a disposal field. It has lots of different names. And essentially, that's just the natural soil beneath the pipes. That is where the sewage is going into. The treatment is designed to treat pathogens, the disease-causing viruses and bacteria, mostly bacteria. And it's mostly done by oxygen-loving bacteria in the very upper layers of the soil, so the top 4 feet or so of natural soil. If you get deeper than 4 feet, there's less and less oxygen, and there is not as much ability for bacteria to live down there, and there's a difficulty with treatment. It just doesn't have the right conditions to do very much treating. And at that level, you're more disposing of sewage rather than treating for sewage. And that's why we want to keep septic or dispersal fields up close to the surface of the land. So the pre-treatment, the top version is a septic tank. The septic tank is under the current sewage system regulations. You might have heard of it. It's called a type 1. There's all this different terminology. So a type 1 system is just referring to a septic tank. It has basically just a concrete tank. It has a pipe flowing into it and a pipe flowing out. The sewage comes in. All the solids float to the bottom. All the greases float to the top. And you have a relatively clear effluent or clear sewage water in the middle. And that relatively clear sewage water then floats out to the field. So every time you flush the toilet, the water raises in the tank and then equalizes by some of the water exiting the tank. And that's how a septic tank works. No electricity is needed. It just comes in and it goes out. And the sludge or the solids fall to the bottom. And that's why every so often, about every 2 to 3 years, you should have the septic tank pumped out so that you have quite a big gap in this clear effluent area of cleaner, air quotes, cleaner sewage water that leaves the tank. The one thing to note about a septic tank is that the conditions inside the tank are anaerobic bacteria, so which means that there's no oxygen. It's very slow treatment. Because there's no oxygen, the bacteria that are in this tank are kind of sleepy. They don't work too fast. And so there isn't a lot of breaking up of the organic materials that are in there. So the poop and the paper and the Cheerios and whatever that are in there, there isn't a lot of bacteria eating all of that up. They're working really slowly. The second type, there's a type 2 and a type 3 system. The type 2 system is they add an air pump. Now, if there's any engineers or sewage contractors in the room, you're going to groan at my simplification about this. But for our purposes, I think this is all that's needed. So in a type 2 system, oxygen is added. This changes the environment. So quite often it's an air pump and it has maybe a stirring mechanism that goes round and round and just keeps all of the sludge moving around together with the bacteria. And these bacteria, because they have oxygen, are able to eat up all that organic matter more quickly. And so there isn't as much solids that accumulate in this particular type of tank. The type 3 system, they add the oxygen, they stir it up, make it an oxygen environment, but then they also add disinfection. So a disinfection is quite often a UV light, for example, and that just reduces the number of disease-causing organisms to a lower level. So if the sewage were to break out onto the surface of the land, it's not as hazardous as sewage coming from a type 1 or a type 2 system. And that's a simplified version of the difference between the three systems. One thing to note, especially when you're thinking about it from an environmental perspective, is there's little to no nutrient removal. So the nitrates and phosphates are still in the septic, in the sewage water that's leaving these tanks. It's not treating for those things. Okay, so now we're going out into the dispersal field. And how does it get out into the, away from the tank, and what happens with all that wastewater? So there's different designs. The one above on the left is the one that we recommend the most. It is called a trench system, and the sewage wastewater goes out on these long fingers of sand or pipe, and there's dirt that surrounds them on each side and across the bottom. And so there's more natural soil to treat the sewage. The one on the right is called a seepage bed. It's basically like a sandbox that's dug down, filled with gravel, and the pipes are laid down. In this case, there is less natural soil around these pipes, and so there's less natural soil to do the treating of this type of any sewage or wastewater that goes into this sandbox area that you can see. So the main concepts when thinking about dispersal fields is natural soil is best for treatment. So the more soil the effluent is in contact with, the better the treatment. So the idea is spread it out as best as you can. Less permeable soil, silt versus sand, for example, the more space that is needed. So the size of the septic system or the sewage system is based on how much water is actually going to get added to it, based on how many people live there, and then where you end up dispersing or how much area you need or land you need to get rid of the soil or all the wastewater is based on how well the soil can accept all of that water. Sort of think about your coffee grounds or you're playing on the beach, and when you pour the bucket of water, how quickly does it go down? Does it make a mud puddle or does it go disappear quickly? The more soil we have between where the effluent, which is the fancy word for wastewater, touches the soil, and where the groundwater is below, the better that is. And then we all know this, water or effluent, the wastewater, runs downhill following the slope of the land. So this is important. So these are the main concepts of what we want to try to build into a sustainable parcel, or when we're looking at sewage for a long term. One thing that's important to note is that there's nothing in the regulations to consider long-term sustainability. There's only the immediate and near future health risk. So when someone's designing a septic system, that's all that we're looking for. Or that's what the sewage system regulation, that's all that is required of them. Okay. So this is just a quick slide to say ways in which we become exposed to diseases and contaminants. So here's a picture of a neighborhood, or a community. There's agriculture, there's sewage systems. People are taking water from the lake and also from the groundwater. We have some industry. We have all different ways of things happening in the environment. So the way that we become exposed, humans become exposed, is in our case for wastewaters, especially through the water system. It gets carried, wastes get carried by the water through the environment, and then we ingest them primarily is the main way that we get sick. So having this in mind, there's places to take action to protect against diseases and contaminants. And the three main places, if you think about the source of the contamination, there's as it moves through the environment, and then just before it reaches the person. Those are three places that you can take action. So for example, controlling the source of contaminants, since we're talking about wastewater, we can control the number of sewage systems that are in a particular area. Less sewage systems, less people, less wastewater, less contamination is possible. So that's controlling the source. We can also manage where and how quickly something moves through the environment. So in this case, an example is keeping the sewage and drinking water far apart. So making, oops, I went too far. Making sure that septic systems and water systems have at least the minimum distance, if not more. And also this would be in the case of having a community sewer or community drinking water. Your source of your drinking water is far away, for a community drinking water system, would be far away from where your septic systems for many houses are located. And then the last one is applying a control just prior to something entering your body. So an example here is treating your drinking water. And at Interior Health, we recommend all water systems everywhere have drinking water. There's a few rare instances where a groundwater well has been demonstrated to show that it has its own protection of itself, but that's pretty rare. And regardless, we would still say it's best to treat drinking water. And there's many different ways to do that. And you can contact your local health office, environmental public health office, if you have questions about that. Okay, so what is the sewage system designed to do? It's designed to manage and protect against immediate health hazards. So it protects against pathogens, but it does not protect against nutrients. It considers the constraints of the subject parcel and the present day use. It doesn't think about or require anyone to consider the needs 10 years in the future or any 25 years in the future when the first septic system fails. It just has to consider the very present day. It uses a professional reliance model. So instead of a permit being issued, the authorized person, which is the fancy word for either a sewage contractor or engineer who are trained in doing this type of particular work, they submit paper files or paper records. And Interior Health accepts those records, not a health inspector, just an admin clerk accepts the paperwork. That admin clerk makes sure that all the information is present in the file, and then they put it in the filing cabinet. Well, nowadays they put it into electronic records, but that's all that's happened. Environmental health officers, they investigate and address health hazard complaints. If there is sewage on the ground, they will come and take a look and confirm and take tests. And they also issue holding tank permits. But again, they don't issue holding tank permits very often because they're not very feasible and sustainable in the long term. The professional associations investigate and address design and construction practices. So the professional organizations, such as the Association for Professional Engineers and Geoscientists, they oversee the engineers, and the ASTTBC, which is Applied Science and Technologists and Technicians of BC, they oversee the sewage contractors, and they're making sure that they meet their standards. Okay, so considerations for on-site servicing. This is just a picture of trying to show everything that needs to be on a parcel. So one of the things, this is my sort of cheat sheet list for what to consider when I'm looking at a proposed layout of a lot. So the distance to surface water wells and to surface water and to wells. So it needs to be minimum 30 meters distance to those. This one here this is a picture from somewhere else. So this one here should be farther than this, but that's what this is. And it should be shallow depth to groundwater. So if it's in a marshy area, that's going to cause problems. If the slopes are too steep, then the wastewater is just going to run out of the hillside at the bottom of the slope and break out into the ditch or what have you. Same thing with a cut bank. A cut bank is, when you're driving along a highway, or for example, and the mountainside would have come down, but the road has come along and cut the hillside. So now you have a sheer cliff in order for the road to pass. That's a cut bank. And you can see that in the spring water quite often comes out and runs down those banks. So if that was wastewater upslope from there, it would be wastewater that was breaking out. The other thing we mentioned, the soil is too tight, such as clay or silt, and it just causes a puddle, or it's too loose, such as graveling sand, and now it doesn't do any treating. It just goes straight through and hits the groundwater without any treatment. And then the last one is the lot is just too small. At the very minimum, we should have a backup area for sewage. And there, we do have some guidelines. 1 hectare is thought to be enough land for most situations that both on-site sewage and water can be serviced that way. 0.2 hectares if it's on-site sewage and community water system. Okay, here's just a picture, an example. It's purposely not from your region because I didn't want to draw any attention. That wouldn't be fair to draw any attention to someone's private property. So this is not in your region at all. But on here, it gives an example. These parcels, the red one is one that I looked at and gave comments about. So we have some slopes. We have short distance to the water. So we have to stay 100 feet back from the water, and we can't build any septic systems on these cut banks that are here. And the house on this more closer house here is taking up most of the land. So it starts to make you wonder, well, where on earth are they putting their septic? And that's some of the questions. My guess would be that it's probably closer to this area towards the back of this gray house is probably where it's located. But you can see that it starts to take up a lot of the land. By the time you have the secondary dwelling or you have the principal dwelling, you've got pavement areas, cut banks, swimming pools, garden sheds, you name it, right? It starts to take away the appropriate places for land, appropriate land for on-site septic. So what is the sewage system regulation not designed to do well? So it is not designed well to manage and protect against cumulative impacts from nutrients and from pathogens. It does not consider long-term self-sufficiency of the subject parcel for on-site servicing. So all septic systems at some point are going to fail. The soils will get clogged up with gunk. and they just aren't going to work as well as they did when they were first installed. And so at some point, on-site services will start to cause problems, and a second location on the property needs to be found for storage. And if we've already built a pool and a house and a secondary dwelling and all of these things, a shed, we've got a place to park our RV, all of these things will then constrain the lot further and further. And there's no built-in requirements into the sewage system regulation to address these things at the time that someone first builds a house. It's a gap in the legislation. The other thing to consider is the impacts at a broader neighborhood and community level. So there's no need to consider when somebody is building a house and their sewage contractor is designing a septic system, they are not required to think about the overall neighborhood or the overall community as a whole and how wastewater is managed in the entirety of the community. That is also not built into the sewage system regulation. Here's an example. Again, this is not close to you. It's close to where I am in the shoe shop. So if we look at the top white box there, we've got some property lines, and each of those blue dots represents a well. And we look at them and we think, oh, that's not too bad. And then we transfer those. They look like eggs. I couldn't make the dot the circle.
Anita, sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I'm going to give you just a 2-minute warning, and then we're going to switch to questions.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks.
So this is what it looks like when we look at it on the land. And all of a sudden we can see there's houses and driveways, and we get to see how it changes. The next part, if we look at that same property, so this is up in the circular oval up at the top left of the satellite image, that's that same property. And when we look at it across an entire community, we can see how many more wells there are in that area. And if you look down in the bottom left map, the red striped lines, diagonal lines, that identifies a vulnerable aquifer. And you can see how many wells, and each one of these lots will also have sewage system there are in this vulnerable aquifer. And if we look at it on a close place along the water's edge, this is properties close to water. And each of these little tiny lots, somewhere on here, they have sewage. The ones close to the lake will likely draw their water from the lake itself, not have a well. They're probably taking it from the lake. But each one of these little tiny lots, somewhere on there is their sewage system. And so it just makes you wonder where it is, where their sewage is going. And because of the proximity to the lake, it means that the sewage is flowing through the groundwater and entering out onto the lake, and people are swimming in that. And it's going to also be causing algae blooms and increased growth of plant life in the lake.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna cut you off just because we're getting late in time, and I'm sure that there's some people who may have questions. So thank you for that information that you were able to provide us, and hopefully people have some questions for you.
Sure, no problem.
Front there. This is your one and only warning that I will find questions later on in the presentations, whether you have them or not, and I will get you with the microphone. But if you do have a question, hand up into the microphone so everyone can hear. Otherwise, back to Liz.
Oh, Raymond, yeah? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Raymond. Anita, you mentioned several groups that are involved in the sewage system, like the environmental officers, the professional affiliations that an engineer has, and the engineer himself. Now, who enforces things. Now everything is designed nicely as per plan, and everything is built according to the rules. And then 5 years later, the owner does something to his system, and it fouls up the neighborhood or the lake and whatever. Who enforces the regulations? Is it left to the neighbors who have to take a lawyer and spend money, or can they call somebody, for environmental health, for instance, or the RCMP, who will look into this?
Thank you for the question. So my answer is no one really, which isn't a very good answer. If there's sewage on the surface of the ground, if there's a suspected health hazard, then an environmental health officer will come out and they will do an assessment. They'll take water tests and test to see if it's actually sewage, determine where the sewage is coming from, and order the system or wherever the sources of the sewage is coming to fix it. So that's one thing. But if it's not causing a health hazard, if it's just the design isn't working properly or something like that, then it's then to complain to the associations, so the Professional Engineers Association or the Sewage Contractors Association, to follow up and their members to see what was going on. And if they don't take action, or if it's sort of outside of that, then it's, from my understanding, it falls to the owner of the property to then take it up either legally or somehow take it up with the contractor, and it might end up with in the courts or something like that if they can't come to an agreement. But there isn't really enforcement unless there's a health hazard involved.
Okay, yeah, we've got one more question. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Bill. You were talking about the type 1 system, and if you're in an area that's marshy or has a high water table and has a seasonal thing where you have a property that actually floods consistently on a seasonal basis, and the system gets overloaded and sends it down onto the neighboring properties, is that something that should be acceptable?
Well, it's not, it shouldn't be acceptable. Whether there's abilities to take action
What are
would
those
kind of
abilities?
depend on the system, on the situation. 20-year floods, 200-year floods, these kinds of things happen. If it's like flooding every year, I think I've talked to Liz about situations perhaps in that area where it happens a bit more often, then we could look at actions that could be taken possibly.
Well, if there are alterations done to make this a seasonal event, then the water, backing up from what you said, the water, you could have somebody come, say in May, when it's going to happen again, test the water, and then action would be taken at that point?
It would have to demonstrate that there was a health hazard that was occurring for them to take action. But it sounds like, I understand your community is considering a liquid waste management plan, and that might be something that's explored on, instead of a lot by lot basis. If it's happening for multiple properties, that might be a better way to approach it.
It is happening, but it won't be on, it's on an acreage situation. It's not on a subdivision.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm just wondering, you did mention that if the water can get tested at that point, then something will happen. I don't know why I have to accept somebody's sewage down my way every year.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. So I'm going to share my screen again, and you're welcome to take down this phone number. That's my cell phone number. After Friday, I'll be on vacation for a few weeks, but you're welcome to call me, welcome to email me, and we can have sort of a discussion offline and see how to connect you with somebody to talk about your specific situation a bit more. Yeah, and it's difficult. The one thing I would say is that everybody should be treating their drinking water. So that's the one protection. So even if you can't control what's happening on your neighbor's property coming towards you, you should be able to treat your own drinking water and take control over that part of it, especially if you're feeling like you don't have control over the situation.
All right, I think that's the time that we have for questions. So I'm hoping to call up Christina Anderson, the watershed planner, and she'll be talking to us about riparian areas. So thank you so much, Anita, for joining us. It's really great to have this information spread more broadly, and I look forward to your comments on the OCP when I get it over to you. So
That
thanks so
sounds
much
good.
for joining us. And feel free to stick around and listen to the riparian presentation if you're interested. But I also understand if you sign off, it's probably been a long day.
Yes, it has been a long day and I've got kids. So I'm actually going to go, and it was so nice to be there with you. And if you have any questions that come up later, either like Liz said, forward them to her, or feel free to connect with me directly. Thank you.
Thank you. And here's Christina.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me. And I'm excited to be here to be able to talk about a topic that I feel pretty strongly about. So yeah, thanks for coming in tonight. I will try to move a bit quickly. I'm Christina Anderson, Regional District Kootenay Boundary Watershed Planner based out of Grand Forks. And yeah, I just certainly recognize a couple of faces here. So it's been good. So I've been asked to speak a little bit about the riparian area. I'll just give that really quick idea of what the riparian area is. It was neat going through some of the old communications about what's been said to the electoral area C on riparian areas over the year. And so that was sort of neat to be able to look at some of the history of what's been going through, why is it important, and then sort of final off with a quick slide for the development permit area. And I know that Liz is going to be talking a little bit about that as well. So really quickly, what's the riparian area? It's that land right beside the water body. So the creek, the stream, the river, the wetland. And it's an area that's a very small, they call it, they usually reference it as the riparian width. So that's from your natural boundary or your topper bank out. It's a fairly small area if you look at the big picture of a watershed, but it's got a lot going on, a lot of ecosystem function, hence biodiversity. There's a lot of benefits and productivity amongst the riparian areas. So the two photos, well, I guess the one photo is just sort of talking a bit about sort of some of the components of the riparian area. So I realize that the riparian area here for the electoral area C is a lot of it's around the Christina Lake area. There's certainly some of around the creeks and rivers. So it's one of the things that I really took out of this presentation, which was pretty interesting to have that as following or me coming in right behind it. And something that I learned a lot when I was working is that it's a lot easier to protect and to keep the area healthy and clean than to try to fix it afterwards. It's really difficult to try to get that turbidity or the sediment out of the system, put land back after you've lost it through erosion. It's a lot easier to be able to have that functioning system and that healthy system at the very beginning. So this is speaking a little bit, I was speaking to somebody earlier on today just about regulations. Your aquatic is your provincial and federal government. You'll often need to get permitting from that side. Your lake shore, so that's that natural boundary into the water, provincial government permitting. The riparian, so that's that natural boundary, so that high water level, so look at the 2-year high water level area up, that's going to be the local government. So that's going to be speaking a little bit about this riparian permit, development permit area, and then upland. The depth of the width of the riparian is very site specific. And it can be based off soil type. So same as what we heard from the septic, soil type, vegetation, slope aspect. But as what we'll talk a little bit about the development permit, we did really want to make it as efficient and as transparent and easy to use. So we have set a set width per water body systems. And then there's a couple of quotes in there. So one of the things, oh, you missed part of my, there we go. Thank you. So riparian area width. It's really important to understand that why do some people say, you need to have a 30-meter width or a 50-meter width. There's a group they all want to see all riparian widths over 200 meters. Just every time, the farther you go out, the more you're going to be changing the impacts of what you're doing, and maybe it's providing more habitat, more areas for nesting birds, that wildlife corridor, filtration of water. We certainly talked about the last presentation, how it wasn't taking out the nutrients, it wasn't taking out the phosphates, and that is filtered out through that riparian. And so we start looking at bank stabilization. Then we go a little bit farther out. That water quality, you need to have that length of filtration. So that's also going to change with soil types, length of filtration in order to get some of that nutrients out. And it also needs to have where's that nutrients going. So that could be the vegetation side of it. And then, of course, that wildlife habitat, flood control. That's one of the nice things about riparian is it really spends a lot of time helping regulate the water. So it takes in the water, helps support groundwater infiltration, and then you can also then have that water during those drought conditions. We'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm moving quickly because I know the time. So anybody can ask me to go backwards if I need to. So this is just the quick historical. I was looking around to say, okay, so, what's been happening here in electoral area C on the riparian conversation. So that's a quick visual. Now you get the table. So 20 years ago, August 2002, every Christina Lake property owner received a letter. And the crazy part about that is I know all the people that received the letter because that's also on the internet. So that is back over at my table and anybody can go and take a look to see if their address is on this letter. And so they were all given it. It was a multi-agency letter that was sent out to say, you guys, we need to figure something out how to do this better. We need to get that shoreline component. We need to be able to improve the situation. You've got a pretty amazing spot here. Let's try to keep that healthy and let's try to keep it longevity. And so then in July 2004, they ended up doing riparian area regulation, and which is now riparian area protection regulation. Are people familiar with the RAPR, RAR? All right. I decide, I'm sure some of you are. You're all like, no, I've never heard of it. So this is the province of BC. They have gone and put in a riparian area protection, and it's over, and my next slide. Yep, the next slide shows you where it is. Over 15 regional districts in the province of BC, and they don't have a choice. You gotta you've got to bring in your QEP, so your qualified environmental professional, every time you're doing that work within that riparian width, that from the natural boundary or top of bank out. And so that was brought in 2004. We aren't covered in that, but I'll show you in a second here about some of those areas. Christina Lake Stewardship Society Watershed Management Plan came in 2005, 2008 to 2011. We had many conversations, public engagements about that riparian. This is super important. And the interesting part about this is coming. So you got the province, you've got the feds, you've got, your multi-generational, the RDKB. The RDKB is doing it largely because we're hearing about it. We're hearing people saying, hey, we need to figure out how to do this. And then we keep going down. Watershed management plan. I'm doing this by memory now. We've directions. I think we've got 8 action items that are just focused on trying to get that riparian, help support that riparian protection, restoration, and just really help support that healthy idea of the healthy watershed. Kettle River Watershed Management Plan was completed in 2015. We did a threat assessment again, and then we did the Declaration of the Climate Action Imperative, and I really wanted to bring that one up just because it is something that RDKB and our board of directors has stated, we really need to pay attention to this climate action, the changing climate, it's on us. we just broke records in the States right now. And I know you're saying, yeah, but it's in the States, it's not here. But we're doing it over the world. We're having those changes by having those healthy ecosystems. We are able to shift and hopefully shift better and live more in harmony with it all. So we had forestry. They've been talking riparian for quite a while. We've got forestry groups. The province has special forestry organizations now that go and check out what their forestry companies are doing. BC Cattlemen's, we're having it in industry, in mining, in commercial, in commerce. So we're having that riparian conversations everywhere. And you know what? I'll just get you to take off my video again. And so up here is the riparian areas protection regulation. All of those colored polygons, that's 15 regional districts, they all have it. So what happens is a development happens, they send the application down to the province will review it. And so that's happening with all of those. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I do know that the riparian area regulation protection team has been staffing up because they've also been very helpful in trying to give me some information. But yes, and you can see us in the yellow right beside it. So we're surrounded by people that have got this regulation. Almost surrounded. And in the States. So one of the things that we did, and in 2018, they did a survey. This is when they're starting to talk about that OCP, saying, okay, now we're looking to this, where's the importance? What are we hearing from the people? And so I'll get you to take the video off. I'm gonna have to learn how to do this with knowing that my video is gonna go up. And so you're seeing 85% water quality. Really interesting to have had that conversation just in the last presentation, just about, you know, that impacts of having that long-term, sustainability and that resiliency of that watershed, which isn't covered under those septic regulations. But water quality came in really, really high with people. Wildfire risk, and I realize that when somebody's filling out these surveys, I really actually like it when I have a date on the surveys, because wildfire is going to always come a lot higher at the end of August, and water quality is going to usually come higher in spring. And which it makes sense because it's at the top of your mind. But the point is like you're seeing that wildfire risk, land-based invasive species, and that's going to be a big one, is being able to understand this. And then your foreshore erosion. So we are showing that there is a lot of interest. Back, that's like I said, 2018 back here, and a pretty good total of people, approximately 400 people responding. Okay, so now let's go to another option. So one of the things that RDKB had to do is they had to take out, when we took over the Christina Lake water utility, Interior Health requires you to do a source water protection. So this is one of the components that they had to do with Associated Environmental, looked at how protected is your Christina Lake. You know, we've got a lot of people that are depending on this as a water source. Where are we at? Where's the risk? And I go back to the point, it's a lot easier to protect and keep it something healthy than to turn around and try to fix it, pull turbidity out of it, or try to get pollutants out of water. A lot easier to be able to work with it. And that's, everybody wants to talk to me about the New York watershed. It's pretty amazing, but they managed to figure out how to do it just by having healthy watersheds. So we go into the flooding. So flooding was one of the very high. So that's one of the concerns of, hey, if we get flooding, we could really have a lot of contaminants or a lot of concerns with our water system. And then we look into the flooding, riparian restoration. So one of the things that they can do to be able to try to help minimize some of this, again, are we getting a sense of theme here? All right. So why do so many people care? And I won't even spend too much time. Thank you. I've spoken a lot about that components. I did like this. There's great positive impacts on the mental, physical health component of it. But I did also really like the diagram here, the natural shoreline, just sort of speaking about, you know, if you have that infiltration, like we talk a lot about groundwater and water source, you know, you need to have that infiltration and need to have a slow infiltration and thick enough that you've got the ability for both the vegetation to be able to use it, the nutrients uptake, the water cleaning, and the soil protection. And so the other one, I liked it because it's not showing devoid of vegetation. So it's showing we've got a couple of shrubs, there's a couple of trees, but it's not providing the same support as what we had from the other image. Oh, I'm missing a photo. Anyways, there's another photo there. Lots of different types of riparian areas. So it's really looking around your site to say, hey, what is needed at my particular site? I didn't really do too well with photos of Christina Lake because it was without being able to ID properties. So yeah, we have just other photos. Roots. So, oh, you're gonna have to move my video again. So the arrow, that is your typical root system of your turf grass. And I thought this was really neat because usually you sort of see these pictures with the shrubs and the trees. These are grasses. These are different systems of native grasses. So it just shows the complexity that's happening there. You know, this is the Kettle River. You can lose a lot of soil really, really quickly if you don't have that ability to have that complexity. And this is really neat. So we've got a shrub right here and you can see it. You can see the impacts of one shrub, but it wasn't enough to really hold it. And then you look at the other side, yeah, you're gonna have loss. Like having a healthy riparian doesn't mean you don't lose property and you don't lose, there's not a movement of land, but it's gonna hang on to a lot more. You've got a lot bigger, better potential. Oh, this is just a really fun one. We're doing an air temperature look at shade trees. Kind of curiosity, you know, are we really seeing that much of a difference? So this is Pearly. We've got one for Pearly is in the blue and the Grand Forks tennis courts are in the green. So it's, yeah, we're seeing a difference. And the other neat part about it is, and these are just big like linden trees or oak trees, or just giving you some type of protection from that heat effect. And so you're seeing it, you're seeing those spikes and the differences, and these are very close. They're just around the block. Okay, I'm gonna move through pretty quickly on this. Water sources, we've talked a little about, you know, obviously the benefit of having that water quality. Remember that 85% of the benefit there are people that were interested in seeing that as a priority for water quality. These are your aquifers. These are your mapped aquifers. And I know that we've got that on one of our maps. That's just, for it to be called a mapped aquifer, just means like it's got mapped. It doesn't mean that that's the only aquifers that are there. We've got aquifers everywhere. They just happen to be what the province has been able to put onto a mapping. These are just your smaller watersheds. And all those blue dots are water licenses. Now, the neat thing about domestic water licenses is you don't need a license. So I only have blue dots of people that got around to getting a license. So there's going to be a lot more water licenses out. So these are people taking water, surface water for drinking. And now let's throw in the groundwater wells. So we got a lot of people. Again, you know, and you look at some of like our water systems and stuff, there's a lot of people that are relying on these healthy watersheds. So the benefits, connectivity corridors, aquifer recharge, healthy biodiversity, ecosystem services, you'll hear that a lot. And that's just it. Having those healthy riparians, healthy watersheds provide you that ecosystem service. Riparian development permit, didn't see this coming. Okay, so yeah, it's sitting right here at the side and the information on it, like we said, this is a draft. So we're still going through it, 10 meters from the natural boundary of a lake. So Christina Lake, any of the other smaller lakes in the area, 30 meters from Christina Creek and Kettle River. And the reason behind that is Christina Creek really backwaters, as people here are very familiar with. So then you start having that big concern with, as we start having those freshet periods, and 15 meters from watercourses and the natural boundary from wetlands. Exemptions, there's like a whole page of them. This was just me summarizing that. We're doing a ton of work out there to try to get a better understanding of what's going on. So this is an inundation map. This is saying, okay, 10 years plus climate change, what do we expect the water levels to be doing? And here we ended up having somebody taking LIDAR. And so this was a desktop study. This hasn't been ground truth, but looking at it and saying, okay, where are our highly erodible lands? Where is our bedrock? Where is our areas that we suspect that we're already seeing impacts? And so what they've done, and you can't really see it very clearly up at the top there, they've circled any areas that are already showing high erosion. So these are areas that we need to get on it for that riparian component to be able to try to strengthen those areas up. Any thoughts on whether or not this is a high riparian, high erodible area? So it's kind of nice because it looks at that as it's not, by the way. And so we've got, moderate, high, moderate, and low erodibility, but that's also going to help us decide what plants are going to work. It also might turn around and figure out what kind of watering or irrigation might be needed. Oh, I'm so done. What can a landowner do? So I kind of liked this because I wrote it. Sorry, it's just because, this is talking about a development permit area and it's going to be after the fact. What can you do when you're looking at your property and you're thinking, hey, you know what? I do see the value in this. I want to bring in more pollinators. I want to have that strength and that healthy watershed, and I want to have the complexity that a healthy riparian area can do. Just sort of some of the different things you can do. There's a checklist for riparian zone health, which I can pass over. A lot of people, I've talked to people in the Kettle, and they said, all I did is fenced it, and things just grew. It was kind of neat. So in understanding, what are the species, and somebody may turn around and go, I don't want a thicket of willow in front of here. Well, then maybe you need to sort of figure out what do you want. Maybe you want to have mock orange. Maybe there's other things out there that is going to be able to provide that complexity in the amphibian or the reptile habitat that isn't going to also cause you to not like the plant. Talk to your plant nurseries because there's a lot of information there. Drought tolerant. One of the things that we were talking a lot about was fire smart. So understanding how do we tie this? How do I tie a riparian, a healthy riparian, and match fire smart principles? So this is being done throughout the province. We're not doing anything new here. So it's understanding, okay, how do I do this better? Any questions? Okay, good, thanks. I like riparians.
No questions? Okay. All right, then I'll try and get through this. You? Rather quickly. Okay, now on to development permit areas. So Christina mentioned that there are the riparian development permit area is displayed over there, and we also have waterfront 100, industrial and commercial over there. So for more detailed information, it's there, and it's at the back of the draft plans, which many of you picked up and are positioned on that table. Thank you, Christina, for showing us the importance of riparian areas. I'll be focusing on the development permit areas. So starting off with what is a development permit area? It is something that is, it's a tool that's available in the Local Government Act that allows a local government to identify areas that need special treatment, and they can be for a number of different reasons. And we have a number of those reasons represented in Christina Lake's bylaws. So to protect the environment and development from hazards, revitalize an area for commercial use, establish form and character of certain areas, and promote conservation of energy and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So either in the official community plan or the zoning bylaw, there will be guidelines that lay out how development should happen in those areas to achieve specific objectives. So if land is in a development permit area, an owner must apply for and receive a development permit before they can have a building permit issued to them. So what is required to apply for a development permit? Many of you may be aware of this already, having done it before. But it's an application to the RDKB Planning and Development Department. The application must demonstrate how the guidelines in the official community plan will be followed. It'll include a written portion and graphics, like a site plan, like a detailed site plan. And a report from a professional may be requested, depending on what type of development permit area it is. I already mentioned that. So the current DPAs that are in the OCP that was passed in 2004 are listed on the side there: environmentally sensitive waterfront, neighborhood commercial, waterfront commercial, general commercial, and industrial, Ponderosa industrial. So what's being proposed going forward is the environmentally sensitive waterfront will be renamed Waterfront 100 for a number of reasons, mostly because it's a mouthful that I have to say multiple times in a day sometimes, and it's Waterfront 100, I think, captures the essence of what we're getting at a little bit better. We're combining the 3 commercial development permit areas into one. A lot of the guidelines were very similar, and we're just trying to carry over the specific ones. And then the same thing with the industrial development permit areas. We're combining them into one just to try and cover off similar objectives for industrial development. Yeah, so Christina talked a lot about riparian areas already, and hit on a lot of really important reasons why we would be considering this as a new development permit area. I forgot to mention that in the previous sign. We had the riparian development permit area being proposed as a new one in the reviewed OCP. It's hard to see in this map. Even harder to see on this screen, but there's a kind of a darker green line that circles the lake and is on all the creeks and rivers and streams, and that is showing where the development permit area is located. The distances are specified in the official community plan, but they're kind of hard to scale up on the map itself. So it may be clearer to see on the maps that are on the wall or the one that is posted on Join the Conversation, if you want to have a look at it when you get home or at home. So Christina covered a lot of these reasons why it's important for us to protect our riparian areas. So I'll just kind of pass this one by. She mentioned the setbacks as well, the 10 meters from the natural boundary of lakes, 30 meters from the top of bank of the Kettle River and Christina Creek, and setbacks from other streams, creeks, and wetlands as being 15 meters. So within those setbacks, we're looking at the objective is to minimal to no disturbance of riparian areas, which includes no building, no soil disturbance, or removal of vegetation. And that is without a development permit. However, exemptions apply, which would trigger the need for a development permit. So an obvious exemption is if you're outside of the development permit area, you don't need a development permit. If you're looking at doing repair or alterations of a building that does not increase the floor area involving the alteration of the riparian area. Fire smarting within 10 meters of an existing structure. There's 15% of the area on your parcel that's in the development permit area that is a disturbance is allowed for an access corridor to the lake. Construction of freestanding fences and signs. Planting species appropriate for the riparian area. Christina mentioned the manual planting and gardening and yard maintenance activities within an existing landscaped area, which is including, the intention of that is to include maintenance on irrigation systems. And then emergency response actions. So all of those scenarios would exempt you from needing to apply for a development permit in that riparian area. However, if none of those exemptions apply, we would require an application for a development permit. So this would mean if disturbance is going to happen in the riparian area, we would request a report from a qualified environmental professional who would assess the riparian area according to the riparian area protection regulation. Though that regulation does not apply to our area, we would use that system that they have to do the assessment because it's already in place. A number of the qualified environmental professionals are familiar with that system, and it's the standard across British Columbia. All right. So that was waterfront development permit area, the riparian development permit area. Moving on to waterfront 100. I mentioned that it's a proposed new name. On this map, you can see it as the lighter green that is outside of the riparian areas that are on Christina Lake or the tributaries that feed into the lake. Development permit in this area. So on La Valley Point, it's just that green area, and then along Sutherland Creek. This is one that's already in place, so many people may be aware of these requirements. It's if you are building a dwelling or adding floor space to a dwelling, and if the septic system is within 100 meters of Christina Lake or one of its tributaries, then you would need to apply. You are exempt from applying if you wish to develop in that area, if the septic system is going to be further than 100 meters from the lake or tributaries, and if the construction or extension does not increase the floor area of a dwelling unit. Also, construction of freestanding fences and signs, emergency response actions, and soil disturbance is exempt as well. Many of these features were discussed, submitting the application. One thing to mention about this development permit area is that you do need to submit a report from a qualified professional. That qualified professional is an engineer with an appropriate training. Within that report, they need to explain the septic design and how it exceeds the provincial standards that Anita was talking about earlier on. So the one addition to the reviewed development permit area is looking at being sure that they address nutrient inflow into the lake, because that's something that has been missing in the development permit area up to this point. So this is the 3-into-1 for the commercial development permit areas. So over here, or in the left-hand side, you see the pink, orange, and red. Properties remain the same, but they are all going under the same title. Just want to mention that this is a form and character development permit area. It's a bit of a nebulous term, so it's generally a set of guidelines to establish consistency and uniformity in an area, normally about the exterior of a building or particular aesthetics. Yeah, so it applies to parcels that are designated in the as commercial in the official community plan. The focus remains on the form and character of the property, that it be attractive and orderly, consistency in color, and then having a focus of the buildings either on a central courtyard on the parcel or facing the road. There's also elements of considering siting and landscaping considerations for energy conservation and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So submit the application that describes how these guidelines will be followed. show where the development will happen on a detailed site plan, and detail things such as coloring or the color and screening landscaping, and that the paving will be permeable and dust-free. Really whipping through these. I know that we're running low on time. But the industrial development permit areas are currently 2, and they are being merged into the 1. These apply to the properties that are designated as industrial. They lie either on Highway 39 or close to, and one large parcel is along Ponderosa Road. The focus of the development permit areas is generally on reducing the impacts of industrial activities and through use of landscaping, aesthetics, kind of similar things to what's in commercial areas, and siting of the buildings. And this is also looking at energy conservation and reduction of GHGs through the similar types of landscaping processes. Yeah, so they're similar process for application. Yeah, the guidelines ask for mitigation of impact of noise, vibration, odor, heat, dust, and other potential effects. And there may be a request from staff for a report from a professional that can speak to the effectiveness of the proposed methods, if there's a particular concern with the activity that's being proposed. And then one specific guideline to that parcel right there, which is referred to as Lot 35 along Ponderosa Drive. Basically just stating that there will be a single access point from this lot along Ponderosa Drive, and access will be located within 100 meters of the parcel boundary of the rail line. So yeah, quick note on next steps for this process. Any comments, questions that we've heard tonight from our conversations, we'll record them, and they will be brought to the steering committee meeting in the next couple of months to discuss what we've heard at this open house. We'll also be collecting comments from provincial agencies, First Nations, and other interested parties, water systems, utilities, so on and so forth. And those will be incorporated into revisions to the official community plan, which will then go on through the approvals process, going to the local area advisory planning commission, and then on to the electoral area services committee. And the board of directors will state or recommend whether or not the plan will go forward to public hearing. If the public hearing is called, we'll have an open house beforehand, and then the public hearing when anybody can say whatever comments they want, and we'll record them verbatim and send them to the board of directors, and at which point they will decide whether or not further revisions need to be made, or they will adopt the bylaw. So, yeah. So thank you very much for your attention. Yes, and questions. I see Raymond, your hand is up. This one?
Yes, can you add some dates behind each bullet?
I can give you a broad timeline. I would say that this process, if all things go as I plan them to, which they never do, but it's would probably be a 6-month process to adoption. So
6 months. Okay.
6 months, yeah. So by the end of the year, yeah. But then there will be comments come at all times. Sometimes that takes longer. So yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
I know it's difficult, but it keeps every time it's another 6 months. Actually, I think last time it was supposed to be in place in August.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
I know it's no criticism. It's just an observation.
No, it's we are at a stage right now where it's 6 months or 8 months. It's not 6 months or a year. It's we're very close to the end of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. But I really want to say thank you, and I want to also point out at the back is Donna Dean, and Donna Dean is the manager for all of planning and development of the regional district, and I really thank her for coming out here. Seriously, I know what her workload looks like. Thank you to Christina, who is nothing but passion. I'm telling you, she works so hard and she believes in every word she says, and she lives it. So thank you to her. Thank you to Elizabeth for the time she's been spending with us. And I hear you, Raymond, another six, but that's the way it has to be in order to walk through that and give people a final look at what we're doing here. So thank you to all of you for being here. There's still some things around the room for you to visit if you want to. We're here till what, 8 o'clock? And hey, it's fun, right? Thanks, everybody.